Okay, welcome everyone to Resurrected Rides. Thank you very much for watching. Of course, like and subscribe to follow the story of this workshop and my custom builds. What we're going to be doing in this video today is a rear wheel removal off of a 1997 Yamaha xvs650 Dragstar custom model. If you've got the classic or the custom, they should all have the same rear wheel setup. And to be honest with you, most 650 XVSs will have the same setup as this. So in this video, you shall learn how to remove all of it. Now this is a project bike. We are going to be building it, and if you want to follow the story of this bike, then stay tuned. Like and subscribe. Thank you. So what we're going to do first on this bike is just quickly drain the oil. You'll find the sump plug located down here under the side stand of the bike. You can see I've already started to wetten it up with some WD-40 just to start to penetrate those threads, make it easier to unlock the sump bolt. So you'll see a time lapse here of me working on the bike. The reason that I'm draining the oil before doing the rear swing arm is because, as previously said, this is only a project bike. So after I've done the rear swing arm, in the next video you'll see I'm removing the engine at some point. So I want to get that oil drained as much as possible, so I'm just going to start doing that now. However, you'll see what I've just realised is the rear bolt holding the side stand on gets in the way of the sump plug bolt. So if you want to use a socket on the sump plug, which I have to get the correct amount of torque to crack that bolt out, you need to remove that rear bolt off of the side stand, and then make sure you use something like a oil draining tub to drain your oil into. This is just a normal standard 5 litre screen wash tub that I've cut the side off of. Makes it so much easier to drain the oil into. And then once you've got your sump plug bolt out, make sure the oil is draining nice and cleanly into that bucket. And just examine your bolt a little bit. What you want to be looking at here is the quality of the oil, and make sure there's no metal shards or little bits of glitter in the oil. Otherwise that could be quite bad in regards to the engine. So if you look at it there, we've got no little metal sparkles, which is quite useful. However, the oil is quite thick and black. And just make sure afterwards as well to rub it off onto a tissue just to clean that bolt off. Little trick, if you get one of your fingernails or your thumbnail and lock it into the thread of the bolt, you can unscrew it through your nail, which tends to extract all of the little bits of gunk out of the thread of the bolt, so you can examine it closer on the tissue. So if you have a look at it against the light on a fine layer on the tissue, you can really have a look, see if there's any metal flakes in there. However, as you can see, we don't have an O-ring on this sump plug, so we need to get one of those. And this is just showing you how thick and dark that oil really is. Doesn't even look like it's moving, but it is currently draining. But this bike has been sat in a garden for about 7 to 8 years with this same oil in it, which is had new out the factory. So you'll see a time lapse here of the rear wheel removal process. It's quite simple and straightforward, so I'll start talking you through that. So of course, when it comes to removing a rear wheel, the main thing you have to think about is that rear axle and the other mounting bolts. So as you can see, I've just WD-40'd up all of the bolts in the rear axle. You just want to crack the rear axle loose. You don't want to have to take it out at this moment in time, because you still need the support of that rear axle so that you don't deform the prop shaft or anything like that, because you need that rear axle to carry on bearing the weight. And then just here you can see I'm cracking 4 bolts out and now taking them out with the fingers. Those are the mounting bolts for the final drive on the rear wheel, because of course it's a prop driven motorbike, so it's almost somewhat like a diff in a car. It's just the final drive is what it's called. And then going in closer, I've already removed the rear wheel off the bike. I've just put it back on to take this video here. So the bolts don't quite line up because the rear shock absorber has been disconnected. So the swing arm won't go high enough, but you can see those 2 bolts are supposed to line up, and it's just because this rear shock's been disconnected, so it's dropped. So anyway, you've got this bolt hole and this one. Those are your top 2, and then this one here and this one here are your bottom 2. They'll line up into threaded holes inside the final drive casing to mount that final drive onto the rear swing arm. As you can see there, it's just a little bit of an explanation. So the section of the swing arm isn't threaded, it's just drilled straight through, so your bolt will be able to slide in and out of that quite easily. As you can see here, there's absolutely no thread in there, but the actual final drive casing is the one that holds the thread in it. So that's something to bear in mind if you've got a seized bolt. Don't try and just wrench it out, because you'll then need to re-tap this casing. Try and be careful with it. As you can see, just easily thread in and out. Always put a little bit of copper slip on something like this when you're putting it back in, just to make it easier for the next time or the next person. So then at the front end, you've got the end of the prop shaft, and you can see it's got little grooves and spines cut into it. That's just to help it locate itself into the back of the gearbox. And you'll have this little rubber boot. It's almost like a CV boot style thing. It just covers that joint, okay? So you can just pop that off and slide it up the prop shaft, and that'll expose all of this so you can see when you're sliding it in and out. It's quite nice and easy and straightforward. And then over onto this side, this is the nut end of the axle, so it'll be nice and easy to undo. And this is the end of that brake rod. So your rear brake comes straight up through onto this rod, and it connects to this spine coming out, this little bit on a lever. So just undo the little spring-loaded bolt, and that will come straight off. And then you also have this support bracket, which just bolts straight onto there with a nut and a bolt and a split pin going through the end to hold it all together. As you can see, this is a little bit out of alignment at the moment just because I've pulled it down. Some bikes may have a secondary sort of bracket coming in between the two to bolt them together, so just be careful and aware of that, because a lot of people miss it where it's hidden under the exhaust. So once you've got all of that unbolted, this rear wheel just pops out backwards, pops out of the swing arm. You just pull it backwards, simple as that. Just watch out for that prop shaft spinning, because that rear wheel's rotating and it's all mechanically connected. As you can see there, my swing arm just dropped down. That's only because I've disconnected the top monoshock, so there's nothing holding that swing arm up anymore. Yours won't do that so long as you leave the suspension alone. There's no need to undo it unless you're doing what I'm doing, which is a full strip down. So then I'm just going to go over right now and double check that rear swing arm, and you'll see the suspension moves because it's disconnected from the chassis. See? Alright, thank you very much for watching my video on the rear wheel removal. Like and subscribe to follow the story of this motorbike, and next we shall be removing the engine.